Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to the ROKER Report XTRA podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen as we look ahead to Sunderland's clash with Gillingham on Saturday, where after another good result on the road at Ipswich Town, we will discuss, among other things, if Sunderland's split personality between playing at home versus playing away gives us any concerns about getting a result this weekend. On the theme of multiple personalities, to help us along our mazy dribble, we first have a familiar voice all the way from Gloucester. We have the artist formerly known as Bomber. How are you, mate?
I'm all right, Chris. Thank you for that introduction. That's something different for me. But yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, you okay?
Yeah, not bad. 2 wins on the bounce, mate.
Yeah.
Does the mere thought of Sunderland give you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside at the moment?
More warm and fuzzier than it has done recently. I wouldn't say we're positively warm just yet, but it's getting there. It's heating up nicely.
Heating up nicely. Okay, well, I'll take that. I'll let you expand on that as we go through. And last but not least, from the deepest, darkest corner of Lincolnshire, that I never quite remember where exactly, John. We have John Stacey. How are you, mate?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah, just from Lincoln, which is the capital of Lincolnshire. Should be easy to remember. I'm very well, thank you, Chris.
Good stuff.
Just trying to sort of take in what Bomber just said and try not to think of any innuendos about him warming up and feeling warmer and all the things he said that were a bit weird.
Well, we'll leave them to the group chat after then, John. But as we said, 2 wins on the bounce. So do we have positive John tonight?
More positive John, just to quote Bomber. Yeah, a more positive John. But yeah, we'll see.
There's never a positive John.
It's never a positive John. A realistic John.
Well, lots to get through, so we'll get straight into it. Gav, Anne and Craig went through our performance at Portman Road in detail in the player ratings pod, which was brilliant as always if you haven't got round to it yet. But I want to start with the fact that our next fixture with Gillingham on Saturday brings us back to the Stadium of Light. I was having a look earlier because I sometimes do get 5 minutes to prep for these pods, and we're actually 16th in League One if we purely went on home form. Out of 12 games so far at home, we've won 4, drawn 4 and lost 4. Should the fact that we're playing at home on Saturday give us any reason for concern, Bomber?
Well, ordinarily, in any other season, I would say no. But this season, you just don't know what you're going to get, and we've become accustomed this season to almost dreading playing at home, and for different reasons than we have done in previous seasons, because we know the atmosphere at the stadium, like when the fans are full and on the players' backs, can be a bit toxic. That's not an excuse, and yet the results arguably have got worse at home. So I would be probably a lot more confident looking forward to Saturday if this was an away game rather than a home game. And I can't really tell you a real reason why, other than that's what the form dictates. I can't fathom it. I can't put my finger on it. I kind of buy into the theory that it's every small team's cup final. To come and play on a nice pitch in a nice, well, I say a nice pitch. It's an absolute terrible pitch, isn't it? But a nice stadium. Sit and get changed in a nice changing room, etc. But other than that, I can't think. I said I don't have an answer for it, but it does concern me more than it would if it was an away fixture, and I just don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, John. We've won 1 in 7 league games at home since beating Ipswich on November the 3rd. That's a pretty horrific run. But does the fact that we beat Shrewsbury in our last home game make you believe that we could be turning a corner?
I hope so. I think, Bomber hit the nail on the head a little bit, the way I feel as well. I think you just can't predict anything at the moment, I think, and it goes the same for most clubs. You look at the Premier League. I don't watch much Premier League, but obviously because it's more on TV, you kind of see some teams really struggling at home that normally wouldn't, the Liverpools, etc. But no, it's an odd one. I really do hope we are turning the corner generally, and I think that's what I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to think of the fact that we're on a tiny bit of an upturn in form. The results are better. The play is getting slowly better. The play on the pitch is getting slowly better. And maybe that means doesn't matter where we're playing. We're bob on for a win. But no, I don't. It's an odd one. If I'm going to turn it into a positive, which is unlike me, you could argue that we're on a little bit of form. It doesn't matter where we play. Let's not be fearful of going home after having such bad form at home. So yeah, I think I'll leave my positive take on that. Let's just think, well, look, we're on a bit of form. Don't matter where we play, we might win.
Can I just say, Chris, just to position that question to John, just if you were just to snip at that, we're saying that a 1-0 win at home to Shrewsbury is a sign that we've turned a corner. That's where we're at the minute as a club.
But I mean, that's the key. I mean, looking at that, like I just said, 1 in 7 league games, but that was our only thing we can hang on to since Ipswich on November the 3rd. So I mean, Bomber, you said I haven't got an answer why. I mean, the obvious thing is, look, there's no fans, but I think we've discussed this. A few people have discussed this on our pods that could work both ways. So Chris Maguire has been mentioned as someone who plays off the crowd. Do you think we've got a squad full of players who kind of need that kind of attention from 30,000 Sunderland fans to get themselves going?
I think we've probably got a squad that is perhaps used to it. I wouldn't say it is a theory that they need it, but I would say that there are certain individuals, Chris Maguire being kind of prime example, that if anybody was a player that needed the big occasion, the big crowd, the big noise and atmosphere, it would be someone like Chris Maguire. But that we've got a number of seasoned professionals in there, and these guys play football 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and for all but one of those days, there's no fans in the stadium. I know, except that it's training, so it's a little bit of a different environment. But the match day is the only time that comes into effect, and you'd have thought by now we should be used to it. It has been. How long has it been now since fans were allowed in the stadium? We're getting on for a year pretty much. So they should be used to it. And the players who have played at a high level and are probably used to 20, 30,000, your Gooches, etc., are professional enough to not necessarily need it. And the ones who perhaps aren't as experienced or aren't as professional or haven't got that experience at a high level have come from lower league and are probably used to playing in front of 2,000-3,000 people in any case.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to make an excuse for it. And why should that be any different as a home game or an away game? If we're playing Hull away, they would normally have, a few teens of thousands or 20,000. I don't know how much their stadium holds. But when we go to there, we'll be playing in an empty stadium, and yet it wouldn't have seemed to affect us away. So I don't know. Like I said, it's a conundrum that I just can't put a finger on.
I think you could flip it on its head, though, couldn't you? Because I think that it boils down to player personalities. And I think you said something there that sort of flagged to me, like Gooch, for example. Like you said, Gooch is a seasoned professional, played at the highest level. I'd argue that I think his personality as a player, he thrives on the fans as well, like Maguire. And I think that there are players in the team, you look at the lower level players, the lower league players, the Anayans, Winchester maybe, that won't be phased either way because they're just happy and kind of and actually I think somebody who's thrived under this environment is Ledbetter. I think, maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but the resurgence of his form, I think, has coincided with the fact that he doesn't have people on his back and he's had his mental health problems with his grief of his losses and stuff, and he's probably a bit more introverted than he used to be and actually probably thrives in that environment a bit more. So I don't know, I think I'm looking at it as positive as I can. I think as a squad, I think we're actually looking at minimal amounts of players who thrive and need that vibe of 40,000 fans. Now, that doesn't mean that if we had 40,000 fans, the team would shrink. I think that actually it would buoy quite a lot of the squad these days, but I think just again trying to turn things into a positive, which is a bit odd for me. I think that we're lacking players that would need that fan base. So I don't think it's a big problem.
But then it becomes less of an excuse, doesn't it, as to why our home form has been so.
We do love excuses. Yeah. We do love excuses.
Final thought, John, on this. I mean, is it possibly a hangover from the way Phil Parkinson had us set up, where we were so reliant on our defending and the way that we were, positionally strong and we kept our defensive shape all the time, that when a team comes to the Stadium of Light and just defends, that we just can't break it down because we haven't got that, fluidity to kind of, have that attack and play in the final third that's going to break a team down?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's one of the many hangovers from Parky's cement that he put into the squad. But I also think ultimately as well, I don't always see people come into the Stadium of Light and park in the bus like they used to because there's no fans. There are some teams recently over the last 10 or so games, trying to think off the top of my head, I'm so rubbish at this kind of thing, but there are teams that surprised us with their attacking intent. And I think that was probably an element of the coaches that were involved in those smaller clubs chatting in the dressing room and going, there's no fans there, lads. I know it's a big stadium. Just go out there and play your hearts out kind of thing. Don't worry about it. So Yeah, you're right. It's a hangover from Parky's methods, but I don't think it's. I don't think it necessarily is as cut and dry and black and white as, look, it's a big stadium, teams are going to park the bus and we're going to have to try and break them down, and it's more difficult because of Parky's old tactics. I think it's just so many different factors, so many different personalities, a blend of lots of different things. And like I say, going back to the first question, I think that currently we're on a bit of form. If Lee Johnson can sort of carry that form and move forward with the improvements we're making in tactics and the method of play, and utilise what looks like game by game he's picking the mistakes out and trying to work on eradicating them one by one, which there's a lot of, hopefully we can keep seeing that improvement regardless of where we're playing and who we're playing against. That's my positive spin, I think.
But one thing we've seen over the last 2 games, obviously one home, one away, both of which we've won by a single goal, is that we've been consistently inconsistent. So against Shrewsbury, we were decent in the first half, but didn't turn up for the second. And at Ipswich, we saw the opposite, where we were sluggish in the first half and picked it up in the second. I mean, I heard Lee Johnson mention it in the interviews as well, Bomber. But do you think it's down to just, how the game goes and maybe incidents in the game, like, the sending off on Tuesday, for instance? Or do you think there's something more fundamentally wrong with our mentality where the players struggle to be switched on for the full 90 minutes?
I think it's more deep rooted than kind of ad hoc individual instances in a game, because when Ipswich had that sending off, Caden Jackson got sent off relatively early in that game, and yet for the remainder of that half, I'd argue that Ipswich probably looked like the better team for that first half. For me, it's just the fact that each game is a complete coin toss at the start of each half as to whether or not the team's going to turn up. We've never been able to do it. I can't remember the last time we've put in a decent 90 minutes, or I can probably count on one hand the number of times in the last few seasons that we have. It does tend to be the one or the other, and it is historically we've been slow starters, certainly under Parky. But it makes it impossible to go into, for me anyway, as a fan, it makes it impossible for me to go into any game with any sort of confidence of a result one way or the other, because we just don't know what Sunderland's going to turn up. And, against some teams, we'll be slow starters and we'll find ourselves a goal down. Against other teams, we'll be quick off the blocks, but still not able to finish chances. Both situations, we generally find ourselves, a goal down or 0-0 at half time, and then it's an uphill battle from there. I think our fundamental problem has been slow starts. We've gone a goal down, and I'm not just talking recent form, the last 4, 5, 6 games. It goes way further back than that we go a goal down and we just seem to be unable to, or struggle to pick ourselves up. And that has been fundamental in some of the results that we've had, some of the negative results that we've had. And I think it's probably a pivotal reason as to why we just don't know which Sunderland is going to turn up. It's like I said, it's another conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, John. What do you think of the two sides of Sunderland? I mean, is it? Are we making a big deal out of it, or is it an actual issue that we actually have?
I used to be completely in this way of thinking that there was just no answer to exactly what Bomber's just explained, in that you don't know what you're going to get from 10 minutes to the next, let alone each game with Sunderland. There'll be a sublime movement and then something that will follow on from that, and you just think, here we go, we're really turning the corner, and then literally 30 seconds down the road, someone scored the most ridiculously terribly defended goal, a mistake by a keeper, whatever, and you just think, well, no, we're back to square one, because that then leads to 20 minutes of backs to the walls, we're losing the plot kind of football. But the more that we talk about this hangover from Parky and what's been put into the squad and the team, the more I start to think about the mentality of the players. And previous managers, previous sort of regimes and previous seasons, when we would have what looks like on paper a lot of players that you think, right, they've got the mentality, if they go a goal down, they'll be fine. And we weren't showing it on the pitch. Like, it was drastically horrendous. You look at the team in the Championship, if you ignore 5 or 6 of the absolute dross that were in the 11 most weeks, there were players in that team that you just think, why are they not? We go a goal down, why have they not got the head in the game? But now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, for the first time in a long time, let's cut through the business speak that we hear Lee Johnson say, but maybe the whole ethos and the sort of atmosphere around the team is changing slightly. And just maybe we are feeling a bit more positive. So what I'm getting at here is the last couple of games, and I know in the group chats and when we've been chatting privately, I have been a bit negative during during the games and around the games. But what I have been seeing is that if we have an attack against us where it's an almost goal kind of thing, even against 10 men, what I have seen is it doesn't always drag on for the next 5 or 10 minutes where we're struggling. Like, actually, we sometimes go up the other end. And I think all that boils down to is real simplistic attacking intent, where they're given a bit more freedom and they've got a bit more desire about themselves because they're given a bit more freedom. And I think stripping all that back, I'd like to think, and I'm a pretty good judge, I think, these days of sometimes what I see on the pitch, I'd like to think it's because simply what Lee Johnson's trying to do is play to their strengths. He's looking at each player and he's saying, right, each player can do this, this, this and this, but they're not so good at this. Let's work with them. Let's make sure that they do what they can do to their strengths and blend that into a tactic that can have a bit of attacking intent and have a bit of, eventually, you know, we're seeing it now a little bit with our friend Charlie Wyke, but eventually we'll start seeing goals. Again, just sort of culminating in a point here, because I know I've gone off piste a little bit. I think that then has a bit of a kind of knock-on effect. And I think that hopefully produces a bit of psychology, positive mentality, where you do get fight from players. That if we do get back to the walls a bit, if we do let a goal in, we're still up for it. You know, there might be people listening to this who think, well, that wasn't the case literally a week ago or 2 weeks ago. You know, a lot can change really quickly. It has changed really quickly. A lot of perceptions have changed of Charlie Wyke over the last week or so, haven't they? So it's kind of one of those situations where I'm trying to look on the positive side of what I'm seeing, and there are changes afoot. So I hope, going back to your original question, that mentality is the key thing that's changing. I could be proven wrong, and if I am, it'll be depressing for the rest of the season, but fingers crossed there's a bit of a change afoot.
Yeah, bit positive there, John. I like it. But Gillingham on Saturday. It's their 8th season in the 3rd tier, and they're sitting in a respectable 12th, which is about par for the Gills after they finished 10th last season. The 6 point behind us after Tonkin Crewe 4-1 at home on Tuesday night. Despite actually Crewe were on a run of 10 unbeaten before that, and then Gillingham turned them over 4-1. Also, they've won 2 out of the last 7 away, which is slightly better than our home form. And Steve Evans has been in the job around 18 months now, and he's turned them into a pretty solid outfit. I mean, it was tight in the 2 draws last season we had at home against them last year. So not an easy game on paper, Bomber.
No, it's not an easy game, and I've just been looking through some of their results before we started recording, and you know, there's a lot of 1-0s either way in there. So, you know, they beat Accrington 1-0. They lost to Burton 1-0 and lost to Plymouth 1-0, all in consecutive weeks. So, you know, they're obviously a team that don't necessarily concede all that regularly, although they don't keep many clean sheets, but it looks like, you know, they score in a fair few games as well. So no team has really put a pace in on them. There's a couple of 2-0 defeats in there. One to us obviously earlier in the season. I think they lost 2-0 to Hull or Ipswich or something like that, but again had a player sent off. Fleetwood, sorry, it was. But again had a player sent off, and everything else seems to be draws or the odd goal up or down. So it stands to reason that pretty much every game that they're in is a tight game. So I see no reason to expect anything different.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, played them twice, one in the cup and one in the league at home last season. It was 1-1 and 2-2. I mean, in their last 5, they've drawn 1 and lost 2, John. Their away form for the season reads 1-5, lost 5, drawn 1. But interestingly, they've only drawn 3 in 24 all season, which is the joint lowest in League One. They've also jointly lost the most games out of anyone outside of the bottom 5 in the division. So actually, I mean, by that, it sounds like they go all out for 3 points. So, I mean, does it sound, I mean, at least on paper, John, that we might not come up against a side who's just going to sit on the edge of their own box for 90 minutes?
No, and I don't think for 1 minute that Steve Evans is the kind of person versus us that would do that. I think, first of all, we all kind of have an impression of him. You know, he's a bit of a shithouse manager. He's come across quite negatively towards us in the past with everything that's happened, and Gillingham as a team have done so since he took over. I used to not have much of a thought process about them, if I'm honest, and the last sort of 6 to 12 months I've certainly thought they're a bit of a shithouse team, which is probably down to him taking over and doing it. But look, on paper they've got some decent players, and we saw that in the couple of draws last season, a couple of draws we recently had with them over the last year. And I guess really it's one of them where you look at it and you just think, if he is setting them up to win, or doing a bit of kind of speculating to accumulating, and if they get tonked, they get tonked kind of thing, then we have to be on our guard. And yes, we've got a great defensive record, but it's just about, I guess, keeping it together. Let's just make sure, fingers crossed, we defend like we have been doing, and fingers crossed the form of the attack and intent continues, and we can get the win. I just think, even if the team's going to come at us, I can't see a problem at the moment, especially if in the past, and I know everybody talks about the fabled Lincoln City game, the recently fabled Lincoln City game, but that was a team who was expected to destroy us, and we're flying, and still are now, but they were coming at us, and we beat them. So
well,
yeah.
I would say about that Lincoln game, I think first 20 minutes we could have easily been 2 down. Yeah. They went clean through on goal twice, didn't they? So
incredibly lucky.
Yeah, we dodged one there. But I mean, if they do that, John, if they come out, what does that mean for us? Do you think that gives out like likes of McGeady more space to do their thing?
Yeah.
Or I remember Portsmouth kind of putting us under pressure on the ball in our own half, and we kind of came a cropper against them at home. So it kind of worked both ways if they step up the pitch a bit.
Yeah, it can, and I think at this level there is a massive element of luck, like you just touched on there. And thinking of Portsmouth, there's times when teams have punished us big time and we just can't seem to turn it around the other way, and we don't get the run of the ball. Again, that's where form hopefully kicks in, and you just think, look, we'll get the run of a few of their shots will go wide, and then all of a sudden we'll go down the other end or whatever. But yeah, McGeady, and potentially after his second half display, he'll throw Embleton in, somebody who can really counter and really sort of like go at players away from the slower build-up, because if they are going to come at us, hopefully Lee Johnson knows that, and he'll say, right, okay, look, they're going to come at us, let's defend like we have been doing, but hey, look at the opportunities we're going to have, because they're going to be flying forwards, so let's make sure we make use of them, rather than normally we take our time building up, perhaps 3, 4, 5 passes. How about let's just cut 2 of them out? It's the old, I used to play basketball as a kid, and it's the old adage of how many passes do you need to get to the rim, and transferring that into football. When I coached an under 14 side, we used to do the lowest number of passes to get a goal and things like that. And there's an element of that if you're trying to get to that counter-attacking style. So perhaps we'll just tell them, go for it.
I would say that we have looked a completely different side when teams have come out at us a little bit. I know Lincoln, at the moment we'll treat Lincoln as a bit of an anomaly, because like you said, Chris, we could have quite easily been 2-0 down there. But the way we moved the ball in that Lincoln game, having got away with a couple, was as good as I've seen a Sunderland team play in I don't know how long. And if Gillingham are gonna come out that way, it stands to reason that we could use those players, use that tactic to kind of punish them. And I'm just looking at the league table now, and there is an incentive for Gillingham to come out and try and get 3 points against us. If they get a result against us at the weekend, that will put them up to 36, which could be as high as 8. And given that they've beaten Accrington, they've beaten Crewe, Ipswich's terrible run of form lately, they might fancy themselves as an outside chance to push for a playoff as a dark horse. So there's definitely an incentive there for them to not sit there and park the bus. And they said the fact that they don't draw too many games suggests that might be the case as well. But if that is the case, and I think we'll find out in the first 10-15 minutes of the game, the longer that goes on, the more I'll grow in confidence that we'll end up winning it, because I think on paper we're 100 times the better team, and if you've got 2 teams that are trying to play football and going for 3 points, for me there's only one winner in that.
Okay, well, let's take some of that into account and try and get inside Lee Johnson's head for what he might be planning. He mentioned after the game at Ipswich that there wasn't too much of a worry about concussion when it came to Bailey Wright, and it was kind of a pretty badly cut lip by the sounds of it, so he should be back. So let's assume Bailey Wright continues in the middle with Jordan Willis on Saturday. Otherwise, you'd imagine it'd be a straight swap for Sanderson. But actually, sticking with Sanderson, would you keep the back four the same, Bomber, or would you be tempted to maybe kind of have Sanderson at left back in place of McFadzean, or even at right back and move Max Power over to left back?
That's a good question. I mean, I rate Sanderson, as you know, I rate him more as a right back than as a centre back. At the moment, I know, John, you feel differently about that, but it's the old adage, isn't it, that we're winning games, we're kind of not conceding many goals, so why change something that doesn't appear to be broken? 2-1-0 wins would suggest that actually the back four, there's not an issue with that. And if you go back to the Port Vale game, then that's what is that, 4 clean sheets in 5 games? So you would suggest that actually the issue's not at the back. So I probably wouldn't be inclined to change it. There is an argument to put Sanderson or just anybody other than McFadzean in at left back. But again, he's part of that back 4 unit. However much he might frustrate us, and I know the WhatsApp group during Tuesday's game was going off about how wasteful he was and how poor his positioning was, etc. But he is part of that defensive unit that's kept those clean sheets, and I wouldn't necessarily want to risk the balance of that back 4 by putting somebody who is predominantly a right-sided or a right-sided centre player out on the left. But you got to weigh up what you lose in not having that balance there against what you gain by having somebody who's actually a footballer in that position.
Yeah, well, John, you love your footy manager, and I think we've got 3 of Sanderson's biggest fans on this pod, and I mean, surely he's got to be tempted to stick Sanderson in.
No, I wouldn't do it. I think that for me, I can't understand it. And I don't mean this nastily to Sanderson, as you've just said. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a good ball-playing defender, and he's good on the ball, and he's got talent. I've never seen him play there. Has he ever played there? And, Bomber hit the nail on the head. Why change it? McFadzean's left-footed. He's not. I've not even seen him kick it with his left foot. I've not seen Max Power kick it with his left foot. And when I have, it's probably poor because Max Power has a poor pass in him, whether it's with his right or his left. So, no. I think for me, look, we're overplaying the fact that Dion Sanderson's a good footballer, because he is a good footballer and he's a young footballer, and it's like, let's get excited about a young, good footballer that plays for Sunderland. He's not a left back, he's a centre back or a right back. As Bomber said, I prefer him at centre back. I think he's good on the ball, good in the air, and he's strong and he's fast, and I like fast centre backs. But I think if Bader Wright's fit, it's got to be them 2 with Willis. It's a good partnership at the minute. It's working until one of them makes several clangers. I can't see the need to change it. So I think it's just got to be the same back 4. I can't understand Dion Sanderson playing left back personally, but people are entitled to that.
I think he did get switched over to left back for maybe about 20 minutes in a game, which I can't remember, but not so long ago. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily. I don't think it was out of choice.
No, yeah, exactly. And this is it. And you look, McFadzean as well, I'm not sticking up for him. He's been very poor, and he is arguably a very poor player. But second half, I thought he was doing better coming forward. He was more involved. He certainly made less mistakes second half, and he was doing well on the overlap and causing problems and giving people space. And he looked defensively, he isn't great, but like numerous people have said on these pods, I don't think he is a left back. He's a left wing back, left winger potentially. Certainly everything I've seen of him, he can't defend. So I think Lee Johnson will stick with him just purely for that balance.
Yeah, I think it might be Northampton where he got switched to left back, but I might be wrong. Yeah, and I'll remind you of this conversation when McFadzean drops a clanger and we get people the only.
And I'll remind you when he scores a worldie.
Lots of question marks for me in midfield, John. Ledbetter was okay at Ipswich, but for me looked like he could maybe do with a rest. I mean, would you be tempted to sit him out on Saturday, John? And would it maybe give an opportunity for Embleton to come in, who looked quite bright when he came on, and maybe gives us a bit more going forward?
Yes to the first bit. I think I'd give Ledbetter a rest. I think now we're looking like we're seeing more opportunities and options in centre mid. I actually don't think that Embleton should be as deep as playing that role or in the centre mid role. I think he should play further forward. If we're playing this 4-2-2-2, is that right? Yeah. I always got to work it out because it's such a weird formation. But if the second row back from the forwards, I would probably play him in there. So if you're taking Ledbetter out, you then have to drop Scowen back if Scowen is already playing in that front 2, that second front 2. So Me personally, I think I'd drop Ledbetter out, and I think I'd probably put Luke O'Nien in there, which might seem a bit off the sort of trend at the minute, because a lot of people are calling for him to play higher up, and when he's been coming on the last sort of cameo 5 minutes last couple of games, he's done well in that sort of number 10 role. But he's probably better suited to that box to box kind of centre mid role. He's got a lot of fitness. He'll keep going. Don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I would do that. And then, I think the second midfielder in that deeper two, I think Winchester's done enough to keep his place personally. So that would be my deeper two, Winchester and maybe O'Nien, which is a bit off-piste, I think.
Yeah, I think Winchester did himself with that yellow card, and I think Johnson was a bit worried on Tuesday, wasn't he? But I saw you nodding your head, Bomber, because I was going to mention to you, I mean, obviously, John's just mentioned Luke O'Nien, and Gooch came on in the second half against Ipswich as well. Gooch actually, when he came on, looked to me like he's lost quite a bit of weight. And we don't know if there's any longer term impact he might be, having after suffering from COVID recently. We've just heard about O'Nien. John thinks he could come in. I mean, I know when Lee Johnson spoke last week, we heard that O'Nien was still struggling to get his arm above his head. I mean, so do you think? I mean, you were nodding your head there, Bomber, but do you think they should maybe stay on the bench a little while longer, or would you have them in contention to start?
So I wasn't aware. I didn't hear that comment from Lee Johnson that O'Nien was still struggling a bit with his arm. If you hadn't have told me that, then I would be nodding to say, yes, I want to see him in the team. The fact that he might still be struggling makes me think that actually he should probably still come off the bench, but maybe for a half rather than kind of 5 or 10 minutes here or there. It's quite clear that Lee Johnson doesn't see him as a right back, and he sees him as a centre midfielder. The fact that he's put in our captain, who was signed as a centre midfielder, out at right back and Luke O'Nien's come in there, suggests to me that he sees him as a bit of dynamism, a bit of energy in that midfield, which we have been sorely lacking. But with what you've just said about him still struggling a little bit, Chris, then I'd probably that nod is probably tempered a little bit. I'd like to see him have 45 minutes. I definitely want to see Embleton come in if that's the case. I think if the game turns out to be as we're expecting it to be, a little bit more open, the likes of Gooch and Embleton and those players that do have a little bit more pace and a little bit more speed to their game in terms of the quickness of their decision making and actually moving the ball, and that's going to be key for us. And we all know that the one thing Ledbetter doesn't do is move the ball quickly. When he's in there, he slows play down. He's absolutely perfect for a game where we're 1 or 2-0 up against a top 2 or a top 6 side where we just want to settle things down. In a game where we want to be on the front foot and we want to play counter-attacking football against a team that we don't know for certain, but we think is going to come out and try and attack us. I want to see, I want to see Gooch, I want to see Embleton, I want to see O'Nien, I want to see McGeady, those players that can play the ball forwards and play it quickly. So, I mean, if O'Nien isn't fully fit, he shouldn't start, but that means that Embleton should. And I think that probably means that I'm kind of in agreement with John, I think, in that you have Winchester and probably Scowen a bit further back, with an Embleton further forward.
So who would be your 3 in central midfield?
So I would say I'm still not fussed on Winchester at the minute. I mean, he did have that nice back heel, and it was a good bit of play. But so far from what I've seen, he's played kind of 3 games and contributed 2 yellow cards and a nice back heel. But I would probably give him another spot in there. So I'm looking at probably as that box midfield. If we're saying that the 2 and then the 2, I would probably be looking at Scowen. I'd say Winchester, and then either Embleton / O'Nien, depending on his fitness, and Gooch. That would be my 4 in a box midfield.
I mean, you've just mentioned that kind of box of the 4, but I mean, quick mention of Jack Diamond. He sat out midweek. It was a bit more of a kind of a dogged game, a bit rough maybe for him. We didn't want him to maybe give the ball away too much, but do you think being back at home will see him come back in?
Yeah, quite possibly. I'll be honest, I completely forgot about him when I'm considering my front ones. But I think that kind of highlights how good our options are in that. If we're talking about that, just solely about that box midfield, those 2 further forward, we've almost got 4, possibly even 5 players who can play in there, who are all very, very capable. You could probably argue that our best footballers are in that position. If the option was to bring Diamond back in at the expense of Embleton, my midfield 4 then becomes Embleton / O'Nien / Diamond. So basically anybody whoever's fittest can go in there for that other position. But I definitely want to see Lyndon Gooch. You could argue that to push Lyndon Gooch further forward alongside Charlie Wyke, but I think it would be harsh on O'Brien to drop him.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'll stick with Gooch, and I'll say Diamond, because he's had more football actually thinking about it than Embleton, and he's done pretty decent. So yeah, them are two further forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's interesting that I think Aidan O'Brien has played himself into most kind of fans' 11s now with the way he's played recently, and the kind of the shifts he's put in doing something the dog work for our next one, Charlie Wyke, because I think that just leaves us with Charlie Wyke, which I don't think we can leave without mentioning. As the Sensible World of Soccer song went, he's our goal scoring superstar hero. 12 goals this season if we take out the Pizza Cup against the kids. Our next top scorer, if you only include League Cup and FA Cup, is any takers, gentlemen?
Oh, it's going to be something ridiculous, isn't it? Like, I don't know.
It's Grant Ledbetter with 4 goals.
Penalties, yeah.
I was going to say Bailey Wright. I thought it was going to be something ridiculous like that.
And Wyke also has 5 goals in his last 4 games, John. So does his recent form mean we found our solution up top this season?
That was a horrible introduction to that question. Does it mean we found our solution? No. I don't think it's the final answer to that. I'm just going to continue the positivity as best I can, right? I hope that he continues this form. He looks better. He is doing things that he didn't do previously. Johnson has hopefully got in his ear. Someone's got in his ear, said, look at this video of you not being out of position 15 times, not being in the right position 15 times. Look at this video of you not trying to get to the end of the cross. Look at this video of the ball bouncing off you when it's coming at you at 3 miles an hour. And do something about it. So it certainly looks like he's turned a corner, to keep using that phrase. And look, his goals are good for us. Don't get me wrong. You can't sit. No one can sit there, and including me, and say, look, he scored that many goals. He's winning games for us. Therefore, he's our worst player still. You know, yes, 2 weeks ago, we were saying he was terrible and he's the worst player that's ever graced the Sunderland shirt. But yeah, I just think positively he is doing things better. Does it mean he'll turn up? You know, that old phrase of like, you know, he comes to the games and performs, or is he just going to be the old Charlie Wyke of 2 weeks ago where he did nothing all game? We gave him 2 out of 10. I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm not Mystic Meg. And I just, I'm just holding hope that like the form continues, because he is getting into the right places sometimes. Look, there were parts of yesterday, right, I'm going to be negative now. There were parts of yesterday where he was still the same old Charlie Wyke, and people have seemed to have forgotten that a little bit. But he was working harder. And one thing to comment on with the whole Charlie Wyke scenario, and it was mentioned, I think it was mentioned in the pod by one of the lads, Aidan O'Brien, for all his mistakes, and what you guys said earlier was absolutely correct, they are looking like a bit of a good partnership, and he does perform the sort of duties that you need someone to perform for someone like Charlie Wyke. So if we can continue the form, they can both keep turning the sort of like corners of the positivity and eradicating some of the mistakes and getting more opportunities, then yeah, keep them both in. What other option do we have apart from playing, Gooch and McGeady up front, or, like, I don't know. It looks like Graham's on his way out, Griggs on his way out. I don't know. It's just one of them, isn't it? Like, we haven't really got any other options. I want to see some more youth practically, but why change it now when he's doing so well? So fingers crossed he carries on.
I don't think I've seen anyone work so hard to stop the negativity coming through there, John.
It's painful, John.
I feel a little bit sick.
I can see you working hard there. I mean, Bomber, I saw you put out a tweet after the game. Yeah. I can't remember whether it was the day after or whatever, saying that you were one of his biggest critics, but you kind of doffed your cap to him by saying, for this week for getting the goals. So, I mean, are you happy with him as long as he keeps tucking them away? Is it as simple as that? I mean,
it would be stupid of me to say anything otherwise. If he's scoring the goals, you kind of have to doff your cap, so to speak, to him. What I would say is Charlie Wyke needs to do what he did last night for 3 or 4 games in a row before he really can start winning me over. Because if we only need to go back and look at the last 3 games, he had a very good performance. Actually, last night for me was probably the most complete number 9 performance that Charlie Wyke has put in for the club since he's been here. He only scored 1 goal, but I thought in terms of his first touch and his link up play and the way he kept the ball moving was as good as we're still talking Charlie Wyke scales here, but it was as good as I've seen him do. So it's as complete a performance as I've seen him do. But then you go back less than a week prior to that, and he was absolutely dog awful in the game before that, and in the game before that he scored a hat trick, despite, in my opinion, playing pretty damn poorly.
Worse.
So if he can replicate, for me, if he can replicate yesterday for the next 2, 3, 4 games, hold my hands up, and I'll say he's starting to win me round. But I couldn't criticise him.
I'll add something to that. If he can replicate what he did yesterday, not score, I think we'll see goals from other people, and I think that we'll still be happy with him, because what he did yesterday was, like you say, it was a rounded performance. Forgetting his goal, he was doing more things that were bringing people into play. There were times where it was like looking at a little bit of a different player. He controlled the ball, he played people in. He was looking for the balls from O'Brien. He was looking for the balls from other people, and that will only bring positivity. 1-2s. It'll bring different other players into play because they're dragging defenders out. He's dragging defenders away. Literally 10 days ago, he could stand there and the defender that was marking him would have the easiest game of his life. Do you know what I mean? So I think you're right, Bom.
I think that was one of the things. So that was my biggest critic of Charlie Wyke. Again, I'm going to make myself sound stupid, because if you take his goals out, he doesn't. He which just as a statement on its own without any context sounds absolutely ridiculous. But if you take his goals out, he never affected a game. In terms of a team performance, he never affected a game. In fact, it was only probably detrimental in terms of a team performance. He may have affected results by scoring 3 at Wimbledon despite being terrible, but he didn't affect a positive team performance. Yesterday, he positively affected a team performance, and if he can carry on doing that, then I'll shake his hand when I'm allowed within 2 metres of him.
Yeah, if
that's
I
not through a restraining order. That's through social distancing, by the way.
If I took all these goals for England off Gary Lineker, I'm sure he would have been absolutely awful for England, because he did nothing else.
Yeah, I know. As a statement, I've set myself up to be shot down there, but hopefully people can understand what I'm trying to say.
It'd be a really good debate piece, what people who are poor footballers have scored a lot of goals in the past.
Well, I'm just amazed neither of you threw it back to me, so we can move on to the next thing.
What's your thoughts, Chris? What's your thoughts, Chris, about Charlie Wyke?
Well, I'm asking the questions, John. So I can,
oh, come on! You're his worst critic.
I am, which is why I'm trying to stay away.
You can't bring yourself to say it, can you? That's the problem.
No, I think. I think Charlie Wyke is. I think you've mentioned it, John. I think he's a poor footballer in a rich vein of form, and I think this vein of form is temporary. I think he showed us over 2 years what his level is and what he's capable of, and I just think this run of form will end at some point, and it'll go back to kind of as it was,
normality,
as we've seen for 2 years. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the player ratings pods after the Gillingham game were saying, "Oh, he's got a 4, he's back to blah blah blah," because that's what he's been like. He's had one good game where he's knocked one in, and then he's had a 4 where he's stank and hadn't had a touch of the ball and not doing anything for us. So that's what I expect. In the next game or two, he'll be back to square one. The other thing I think is that by having Wyke up front, he dictates the way we play. So I think part of our attacking problem in the final third is because we have Wyke up top, and we've only looked better recently because we've had someone close to him in Aidan O'Brien. Because as a footballer, when Charlie Wyke's got nobody within 10-15 yards of him, another Sunderland player, he looks like a lost child up front. A very big one, but he looks like a lost child. That's my take on Charlie Wyke. So are we allowed to move on now?
You're just going to die on the hill, aren't you, Chris?
I'm still up there with you, Chris. I'm still up there with you at the minute. Like I said, it's going to take 3 or 4 consecutive performances like last night to win me. I'm
up there with you, but at the end of the day, I'd rather you take the
take the
The
flak
abuse
for it.
that's probably going to come your way for saying it.
Well, we'll see on Saturday. Actually, one last point before I get to your predictions for Saturday. Just very quickly, Gillingham have been busy over the last week or so in the window. They've signed centre-half Robbie Cundy on loan from Bristol City this week. They've also had, it was quite interesting actually, they've had 3 players on loan from Southampton. They've had Tom O'Connor, Callum Slattery, and they had Tyrek Johnson, all rated highly. Johnson actually was made permanent this week at Gillingham. And I saw the interview with Lee Johnson. He was asked after the Ipswich game about the window and whether we'd do any business. He seemed pretty keen, pretty confident that we'd be busy before 11 p.m. on Monday when the window closes. I mean, Bomber, what type of business would you like us realistically to do between now and then?
Well, I think if you'd have asked me this in January at the start of January when the window opened, I would have said probably, well, certainly a left back, if not 2, depending on the extent of Denver Hume's injury. But definitely a left back, and I would have said a striker as well on the proviso that we could offload Graham and or Grigg. I have a sneaky suspicion that Charlie Wyke's form might mean that we probably aren't so hot in our pursuit of a striker. Which does concern me because, like you said, Chris, he's just as likely to turn in a 3 out of 10 next week as he is an 8 out of 10. But I don't think the fullback positions. You could argue that we possibly need another right back, although Bailey Wright can play there, Sanderson can play there, Max Power's doing a decent enough job there. I don't know how far away Conor McLaughlin is. I would probably say that I don't think we need to do an awful lot. It's more depth for me in some of the positions than actually people who will come and sit in a starting lineup, other than a left back and a striker. But I fear that we might not get a striker now.
Yeah, it was amazing actually when you said depth there. I mean, just having that extra name in Winchester in midfield gives us so much more options. It's amazing, isn't it? What just one player can give you and open things up. I mean, John. I mean, if you've got any kind of different thoughts to Bomber on that?
No, I think I echo Bomber's thoughts with regards to the depth thing. I think that's all I was thinking of. But I guess the one thing I'll add to it is I'd like to see some pace. I'd like to see somebody bought with some pace, probably further up. Like if it's going to be a striking option, somebody that plays off the main striker if Wyke's form hopefully continues. Because O'Brien hasn't got much pace. McGeady hasn't got much pace. You could argue Gooch has a bit of pace. Embleton has a bit of pace when he gets going. You could argue Anayan's got a little bit of pace if we're playing him further up. And Scowen gets about. But I'd really like to see more like a lightning winger kind of style pace. A lightning number 10 bit of pace. I just feel at times generally, and maybe it's just the way he wants to play, but generally we're a bit slow going forward, and I'd like to see a bit of speed, a bit of what Diamond does more of, and a bit of what McGeady does more of, but quicker because McGeady's a bit slow. So a bit more pace.
I'd be happy for that in a fullback position as well. If we could pick up, not necessarily as a striker, but if we could pick up a left back and possibly a right back who are just attacking minded, decent enough on the ball, but with pace, I think that will probably be enough. Because you named kind of 2 or 3 there in Gooch and Diamond who can play that further forward and have got the nous and the pace to get beyond Charlie Wyke from a slightly deeper position. But out wide is where we have been lacking.
Yeah, and I think Power and McFadzean, they take 2 or 3 1-2s to get forward. They're a little bit slower, whereas you want someone to play a ball in and peg it and literally be there quicker than anybody else can get the next ball kind of thing. So I agree there. A bit of pace fullback.
Yeah, well, you look at Max Power's overlapping runs and they look so painful. I mean, I take my all full praises for him actually attempting them, and he does it 4, 5, 6 times a half. So fair play to him. But afterwards, he looks like he's about to keel over and have an aneurysm.
Yeah. People have said it before, but we're missing Denver, and I think that that kind of pace would be perfect either side.
Very, very quickly, we've got about 20 players or something ridiculous out of contract in the summer, and obviously a few days left of the window. Every chance somebody higher up Championship or whatever might put a cheeky bid in for one of these players who is out of contract. I mean, who would you desperately keep hold of?
I think I'm not too fussed about in the goalkeeping positions. I'm not sure if Patterson actually is one of those. I would probably do my best to keep hold of Patterson, but I wouldn't be devastated if Burge wasn't one of them. I think we have to keep hold of Jordan Willis. That's an absolute no-brainer for me. The rest, it's all kind of hypothetical, because if we were to have a cheeky bid put in for, I don't know, let's say Lyndon Gooch, and the powers that be decide that actually it's too good a bid to turn down, it then becomes, what do we do with that money, whether it's reinvested or whether it's just swallowed up. I certainly wouldn't let there's a handful there that I wouldn't let their contracts go for nothing, and I would try and sort them out, even if it's on shorter term deals. But in terms of January bids, there's only a handful really that I would be, no, we absolutely need to keep hold of. And the one that springs to mind immediately that's front and centre is Jordan Willis for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't sort of go much further than that, except to say that I know he's not had the greatest few weeks form wise, but Bailey Wright as well. I think all I would think when you were talking there, Bummer, was if we're not going to get promoted, I don't think, I hope we do, but if you're thinking of championship clubs coming in for people who can step up to that level, it would be Bailey and Jordan Willis, I think. And obviously, Hume being injured, I think probably puts us in a good position to keep hold of him, because no one wants to buy an injured player, perhaps. But
yeah,
I think he would probably be one of our main assets. He would be one of our main assets for sure. But no, I agree with you, Bum. I'd actually be a bit interested to see what people want to put in for him, most of them, if they're out of contract.
It says a lot. It says a lot that you're not reeling off the players that we want to keep.
Yeah.
You're not really bothered about keeping.
I wouldn't be
Charlie Wyke.
devastated about many of them. I wouldn't be devastated. But again, if we were to sell someone like Gooch and not replace them, or certainly one of the centre backs and not replace them, then I'd have a massive issue with that. But if it was a not too good an offer to turn down, and we actually used that to backfill effectively, I wouldn't be devastated in many of them leaving, to be fair.
Yeah. Okay, prediction time. So Gillingham at home on Saturday. John, I'll go with you first. Can we have a result? And since you found the love for Charlie Wyke, you can give us your prediction on goal scorers as well.
I'm going to go for 2-1. I think we'll concede. I know it sounds horrible, but I think we'll concede. I just think you've scared me a bit by saying these lot go for it. It's probably the first team in a while that we've had probably going to really go for it. So I think we'll concede, but I think we'll score 2, and I'm positive about that because I think that we've turned a corner attacking wise. As far as goal scorers go, I'm going to go for McGeady and Grant Ledbetter penalty. I can't
believe you didn't go for like that. Bomber, scorers.
So I've got, in terms of a score prediction, I've got 2 kind of counterbalancing weights. So I think that it's a massive positive for us if Gillingham come out and try and play a bit and come out and attack us. I think that's where we'll be best. And if we were away and they were doing that, I would probably say a 3-0 or something like that. The fact that we're at home then counterbalances that argument. So I think it will be quite tight. I think it will be quite cagey. I think it will be more open, but I'm going to go 1-0 Charlie Wyke.
Good stuff. Well, according to the lads, everyone is in for an enjoyable Saturday, so if it doesn't happen, you know where to direct your frustration. That just leaves me to say, Bomber, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you very much. Enjoyed that.
And John, always a pleasure. Look out for Jimmy's ratings on the site immediately after the final whistle on Saturday, and our player ratings pod that should drop soon after. But from us, it's bye for now.